There is a moment most people never talk about, not because it's rare, but because it's unsettling in a way that language struggles to hold. A moment when you suddenly realize that the thing you call you is not as solid or obvious as you've always assumed, and it doesn't arrive with fireworks or drama, but quietly, almost embarrassingly, like catching yourself thinking about your own breathing and realizing you can't stop thinking about it now. And once it happens, once you notice it, something subtle fractures and never fully seals again. Because from that point forward, you don't just exist, you watch yourself exist. And that watching changes everything. Think back for a second, or imagine it if you can't remember. A time when mirrors weren't tools but portals, when you didn't yet recognize the face staring back as yours, when it was just movement responding to movement, a strange creature behind glass. And then, one day, something clicked, and that reflection stopped being a thing and became you, a body, a face, an object in the world that could be seen, judged, and recognized. And from that moment on, you were never just inside life anymore. You were also standing slightly outside it, observing. As children, this realization feels almost magical, but as we grow older, it fades into the background noise of daily existence, replaced by concerns that feel more practical, more manageable, like how we look, how we're perceived, how well we fit into the invisible expectations that surround us. But the strange thing is, the original shock of self-awareness never actually disappears. It just waits, dormant, until the right moment pulls it back into focus. Have you ever caught yourself staring at your reflection just a little too long, maybe late at night, or in a dim bathroom, or in the dark glass of a window, and suddenly felt a flicker of unease, like you were looking at a stranger wearing your life? And if that's happened to you, I want you to pause for a moment and tell me in the comments what that moment felt like. Confusion, curiosity, fear, or something harder to name. Because these moments are more common than we admit. When we stare long enough, the familiar starts to dissolve. The face stops being a symbol and becomes flesh, hair, texture, movement, and we realize something deeply unsettling. That this body is doing things constantly without our permission. Hair growing, skin shedding, oils forming, cells dying and regenerating. All of it happening beneath our awareness, like a machine we're trapped inside, but never given the manual for. And suddenly the idea that I am my body feels less comforting and more absurd. Your eyes, those small dark openings in your skull, move on their own, absorbing the image of you, pulling your reflection into the tiny singularity of consciousness behind them. And if you linger on this thought long enough, it can feel as though reality itself is being swallowed by awareness, like everything you see only exists because it's being seen. And you're left wondering where exactly you are in all of this. Are you the body, the observer, the thoughts commenting on the observer, or something else entirely? Most of the time, we don't ask these questions explicitly, but they never stop influencing us, because even when we're not staring into mirrors, we're still surrounded by them. Except these mirrors have faces, voices, opinions, and expectations. Other people. Every interaction becomes a subtle exchange of perception. You see them seeing you, and they see you seeing them. And in this loop, something curious happens. You start to experience yourself not just from the inside, but from the outside as well. Sociologists call this process the looking glass self, the idea that we come to understand who we are by imagining how others see us, imagining how they judge that appearance, and then feeling pride, shame, or anxiety based on those imagined judgments. And over time, these feelings solidify into identity. Ask yourself honestly, how much of who you think you are exists only because you believe others see you that way? And if this question hits uncomfortably close, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, because this is where things start to get interesting. As we grow, these imagined perspectives multiply. Parents, teachers, friends, strangers, social media, each one adding another angle from which we feel watched, measured, evaluated. And the result is that we begin to manage ourselves like a performance, adjusting posture, tone, humor, opinions, even values depending on who's in the room. You may not notice it consciously, but you do it. We all do. And the exhaustion that creeps in isn't because we're fake, it's because the task itself is impossible. You are trying to stabilize something that is fundamentally unstable, a self that exists in motion, in context, in flux. But yet you're expected to present it as consistent, authentic, and complete. Before we go further, let me ask you something important. Do you feel more like the actor in your life or the audience watching the performance, and why? Drop your answer in the comments, because that distinction matters more than it seems. The philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre once argued that self-consciousness doesn't arise in isolation, but is ignited by the presence of others, by the realization that you are not just a subject experiencing the world, but also an object within it, visible and interpretable. And this realization can feel like a spotlight you never agreed to stand under. Sartre explored this idea in his play No Exit, where three characters find themselves trapped in a room with no mirrors, no windows, no escape, forced to understand themselves only through the judgments and descriptions of the others present. And slowly, agonizingly, it becomes clear that this is their punishment. Not fire or chains, but perception, being seen without control, defined without consent. One character famously declares, "Hell is other people," a line often misunderstood as hatred toward others, when in reality it points to something more intimate and disturbing, the dependence we develop on other people's perceptions to know who we are. Imagine being unable to confirm yourself without someone else reflecting you back, and imagine that reflection never quite aligning with how you see yourself. That tension, that gap, is where anxiety breeds. This is why social situations can feel draining, why being observed can feel like pressure on the chest, why even praise can feel hollow or unstable, because it ties your sense of self to something external and uncontrollable. And the more you care about maintaining a certain image, the more fragile that image becomes. Ask yourself, how often do you adjust your behavior not because you want to, but because you're anticipating how it will be received? And more importantly, how often do you notice yourself doing it? Share your thoughts in the comments, because awareness of this pattern is the first crack in the illusion. Psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan once remarked, "I see only from one point, but in my existence I am looked at from all sides." And this captures the asymmetry at the heart of being human. You experience yourself as a singular stream of consciousness, but you exist as a multiplicity of images in the minds of others, none of which you can fully access or control. It's like being the curator and the security guard of an art gallery that contains only one exhibit, yourself. And every visitor has a different opinion about how it should look. When you fail to satisfy one of them, it feels personal, but the truth is, the task was never achievable. And this is where self-awareness begins to feel less like a gift and more like a burden. The more aware you become of how you're perceived, the more mental energy you devote to monitoring, correcting, refining, and defending yourself. And eventually, you might start to wonder whether there's a version of you beneath all this vigilance, or if vigilance itself has become the self. This hyper-awareness doesn't just affect how we act, it alters how we feel in our own bodies. Suddenly, movements feel awkward, silence feels loud, presence feels heavy, and the body that once felt like a home begins to feel like a stage. But here's the paradox. The same awareness that traps us is also the doorway out. Because when we turn that attention inward without trying to fix or perform, something unexpected happens. When you stare into the mirror long enough, not searching for flaws or validation, but simply observing, the sense of a solid self starts to dissolve. There is no core to grasp, no final version to arrive at, only processes unfolding, thoughts arising, sensations appearing and fading. And this realization can be terrifying or liberating, depending on how you meet it. Many of us resist it, clinging to identities, labels, narratives, anything that promises stability. But stability was never part of the deal. The body changes, the mind shifts, circumstances rearrange themselves without asking, and the self we try to defend is always a step behind reality. The discomfort we feel isn't because something is wrong, it's because we're demanding permanence from impermanence, control from chaos, certainty from a universe that offers none. And yet, when we stop fighting this, when we allow the strangeness of being to be strange, something softens. The sense of being watched loosens its grip. The need to be seen a certain way relaxes. The doors of that small mental room begin to open. Before we continue, I want you to pause and reflect. When was the last time you felt truly at ease being seen, not because you were admired, but because you weren't trying to be anything at all? Leave your answer in the comments, and if this exploration is resonating with you so far, take a moment to like the video. It genuinely helps this kind of content reach people who might need it. In the next part, we'll go deeper into why awareness feels painful, how meaning survives instability, and how embracing this paradox might be the closest thing we have to freedom. As awareness deepens, it often begins to feel less like illumination and more like exposure, as if something private has been dragged into the open without your consent. Because awareness doesn't just show you the world, it shows you yourself in the world, constantly situated, constantly framed, constantly interpreted. The strange irony is that the more clearly you see this process, the harder it becomes to ignore, and the easier it becomes to feel trapped inside it. You notice how every decision seems to echo outward, how every word carries the weight of how it might be received, how silence itself can feel like a statement. And slowly, without realizing it, you begin to live slightly ahead of yourself, anticipating reactions, rehearsing responses, preemptively correcting imagined misunderstandings. This is not vanity, it's vigilance, and vigilance is exhausting. Anthropologist Ernest Becker described the human condition as a contradiction, a creature that is both symbolic and biological, capable of imagining infinity while trapped inside a decaying body. And it's this contradiction that awareness relentlessly exposes. When you become aware of your own awareness, you don't just think, you watch yourself thinking, and then you watch yourself reacting to those thoughts, and suddenly there is no clear ground to stand on. Have you ever noticed how difficult it is to fully inhabit a moment once you start analyzing it while it's happening? If you have, tell me in the comments what situations trigger that feeling for you most. Social gatherings, creative work, quiet moments alone, or something else entirely. This self-monitoring loop is especially intense in social contexts, where perception multiplies. You are not just you are the version of you that exists in each person's mind, and because you can never fully know those versions, you're left managing a set of invisible possibilities, some flattering, some humiliating, some deeply unfair. This is where shame quietly enters, not as a response to wrongdoing, but as a response to visibility. Shame says, I am being seen incorrectly and I cannot fix it. And because this discomfort is vague and hard to articulate, we often turn it inward, assuming the problem must be us. We start to believe that if we were more confident, more authentic, more self-aware, then this tension would disappear. But paradoxically, the more self-aware we become, the more pronounced the tension can feel. It's like turning up the resolution on an image, only to realize there's no single subject, only pixels. This is why advice centered around finding your true self often falls flat, because it assumes there is a final, stable version of you waiting to be uncovered, when in reality, the self is more like a process than a thing, something that emerges moment to moment, depending on context, mood, memory, and environment. When we fail to find this imagined core, we often interpret the absence as emptiness or fraudulence, but absence might simply be the truth of the matter. The discomfort isn't evidence of failure, it's evidence of honesty. And yet, honesty without compassion can feel brutal. So we armor ourselves with identities, labels, roles, narratives, anything that promises coherence, even if it costs us flexibility. We say, "This is who I am," not because it's fully true, but because uncertainty feels worse. Before we move on, I want to ask you something. How much of your identity feels chosen, and how much feels inherited, assigned, or quietly imposed over time? Leave your thoughts in the comments, because recognizing this distinction can be surprisingly liberating. When we examine the body under this lens, the same pattern emerges. The body feels intimate, personal, but also strangely alien. It moves, reacts, ages, and malfunctions according to rules we didn't design. You didn't choose your nervous system, your hormonal responses, your genetic predispositions, yet you live inside their consequences every day. When you become acutely aware of this, the sense of authorship over your life can weaken. You start to see yourself less as a controller and more as a participant, a passenger riding a system that mostly runs on its own. And this realization can feel deeply unsettling in a culture that glorifies control, mastery, and optimization. But here's the subtle shift, the moment when awareness begins to change its character. When you stop demanding that awareness deliver certainty, when you stop asking it to stabilize what is inherently fluid, awareness softens. It becomes less of a spotlight and more of a field, less of an interrogation and more of a witnessing. The body becomes less of an object to manage and more of a process to accompany. Thoughts become events rather than commands. Identity becomes something you participate in rather than something you must defend. And in this space, something unexpected happens. The pressure eases. Not because you've solved the paradox, but because you've stopped trying to escape it. This is where many philosophical and psychological traditions quietly converge, not in offering answers, but in loosening the grip of the questions themselves. When existential thinkers speak about freedom, they rarely mean control in the conventional sense. They mean the freedom that comes from no longer demanding that reality conform to a fixed image of how it should be. Sartre himself argued that anguish is not a flaw of consciousness, but a feature. The emotional response to recognizing that there is no predefined essence dictating who we must be. And while this can feel destabilizing, it also opens a space of possibility. The pain of awareness is not a signal that something has gone wrong, it's a sign that you are seeing clearly. The problem arises when clarity is paired with resistance, when we fight the instability of the self, when we insist on permanence, when we cling to validation as proof of existence, we remain trapped in that small room of judgment and fear. But when we allow instability to be what it is, when we stop asking awareness to give us a final answer about who we are, the room begins to feel larger. The walls don't disappear, but they lose their power. This is what it means to say that the doors of hell are open. not because suffering vanishes, but because it no longer defines the whole space. You begin to notice moments of lightness, moments where you're not performing, not monitoring, not narrating yourself in real time. Moments where you simply are. They might be brief, fleeting, easy to miss, but they matter. They remind you that awareness doesn't have to be a curse. It can also be a form of wonder. Think of a child encountering their reflection for the first time, not yet burdened by judgment, not yet divided into subject and object, simply fascinated by the miracle of existence responding to itself. That sense of wonder never fully leaves us, it just gets buried under layers of expectation and fear. And every so often, through art, philosophy, solitude, or even discomfort, it resurfaces. Before we move toward the final section, I want to ask you a reflective question. When was the last time you felt wonder without immediately trying to explain it? And if you can recall such a moment, share it in the comments, because these experiences often resonate deeply with others reading along. If this video has been meaningful to you so far, consider liking it, not as an obligation, but as a signal that this kind of slow, reflective content is worth sustaining. In the final part, we'll bring these threads together, explore how meaning survives without certainty, and reflect on how embracing the paradox of self-awareness might not resolve our questions, but change our relationship to them entirely. If there is a quiet tragedy woven into human awareness, it may be this: that once we realize we are here, once we recognize ourselves as something that exists and can be perceived, we spend much of our lives trying to justify that existence, trying to make it stable, meaningful, and defensible in the eyes of others and ourselves. We look for narratives that will explain why we are the way we are, identities that will anchor us, achievements that will prove our worth. But no matter how carefully constructed, these structures always feel temporary, like scaffolding erected around something that keeps changing shape. And the more deeply aware you become of this instability, the more tempting it is to see it as a flaw, as evidence that something essential is missing. But what if nothing is missing? What if the discomfort itself is simply the sensation of seeing clearly? The body you inhabit, the mind you experience, the self you try to understand, none of these were ever meant to be static objects. They are processes unfolding in time, contingent, relational, impermanent. When you resist this, when you demand coherence where none can exist, awareness turns sharp, even cruel. But when you allow things to move as they are, awareness becomes spacious. This doesn't mean you stop caring, or that fear disappears, or that uncertainty magically resolves. It means you stop treating uncertainty as an enemy. You stop asking the world to confirm you. You stop asking other people to hand you a reflection that will finally feel complete. And in that release, something subtle but profound occurs. The hypervigilance eases. The need to constantly oversee yourself loosens its grip. You are still aware, perhaps even more so, but the awareness no longer feels like a spotlight burning holes in your sense of being. It becomes more like a quiet witness. You begin to notice how often suffering arises not from what is happening, but from how tightly you cling to how you think it should be happening. And this insight doesn't solve life, but it changes how heavy it feels to carry. Before moving forward, let me ask you something deeply personal. Do you feel like you are trying to become someone, or trying to allow yourself to be what you already are? And which of those feels more exhausting? Take a moment and share your thoughts in the comments, because many people struggle silently with this distinction. When we speak of meaning in this context, it's tempting to imagine it as something grand or permanent. But meaning doesn't need to be monumental to be real. Meaning can exist in attention, in curiosity, in the willingness to stay present with questions that have no final answers. It can exist in recognizing that the self you are so concerned with protecting is not a thing that can be lost because it was never a possession to begin with. It is an activity, a movement, a relationship between awareness and experience. And when you see this, even briefly, the fear of being seen softens. The fear of being misunderstood loses some of its power. You realize that no single gaze can capture you, not even your own. The mirrors no longer feel like prisons. They become surfaces that reflect momentarily and then let go. And perhaps this is what it means to step outside the room Sartre described, not by escaping perception, but by no longer asking it to define you. The doors were never locked. They were guarded by expectation. As we approach the end of this reflection, I want you to consider something gently, without pressure. If awareness is both the source of your discomfort and the doorway beyond it, how might your relationship to your own thoughts, your body, and the gaze of others change if you treated awareness not as a problem to solve, but as a phenomenon to observe with curiosity? Leave your answer in the comments, because this question doesn't have a right response, only honest ones. This exploration of awareness, instability, and meaning is something I've been circling for a long time, not as a conclusion to arrive at, but as a space to sit within. And it's the same space that gave rise to a project I've been working on quietly, patiently, allowing it to unfold without forcing it into certainty. In March of 2026, a book I've written called The Terrible Paradox of Self-Awareness will be released, and it explores these same themes in greater depth: the strange pain and unexpected beauty of being aware, the instability of the self, the tension between embodiment and consciousness, and the possibility of finding poise without demanding resolution. The book doesn't offer answers in the traditional sense, but it offers room to reflect, to wander, to sit with questions that don't need to be fixed. If this video has resonated with you, if you found yourself pausing, nodding, or feeling unsettled in a way that feels meaningful, the book expands on these ideas with the space and patience that only a longer format allows. It's available for pre-order now through the link in the description. And while there's no obligation, I want to be honest, pre-orders genuinely make a significant difference in allowing thoughtful, slower work like this to exist in the world. If you've enjoyed this channel or similar reflections in the past, this book may resonate deeply with you. And before we part, I want to leave you with one final thought, one that doesn't ask to be solved. The fact that you can notice yourself noticing, that you can feel unsettled by your own awareness, that you can question the nature of your existence at all, is not a flaw or a mistake. It is part of what makes this experience strange, difficult, and quietly extraordinary. You are not failing at being human because you feel this tension. You are experiencing it fully. And perhaps meaning isn't found in escaping the paradox, but in learning how to live gently inside it. If this reflection stayed with you, consider liking the video to support this kind of work, and more importantly, share your thoughts below. What does self-awareness feel like to you? A burden? A gift? Or something that changes depending on the day? The conversation doesn't end here. Thank you for being here, for listening, for reflecting, and I'll see you in the next one.